finally, after 2 weeks of finding things to review instead of covering this, we're actually on the topic of corporate greed gone wild. Finally got there. This is the Belko Experiment with John Gallagher Jr., John C. Reilly, and of course, because James Gunn's involved, we have Sean Gunn and Michael Rooker. This is your spoiler warning. Should you choose to continue, I'll assume you've either seen it or you simply don't care. So before I go into, the breakdown, analysis, etc., there is one other cast member who was very interesting to me. I was watching it and going, this Barry Norris, COO, is very vocally familiar. It didn't look particularly familiar. It was just his voice. I've recently been playing Kingdom Hearts again. Finished the first one and partway through the second. But it's really the first one that matters, because Tony Goldwyn is the voice of Tarzan in both the film and Kingdom Hearts. There was a particular moment where he kind of made a sound before he started a sentence, and that really keyed me into it. I went, wait, you're Tarzan? And I looked it up, and yes, he was. So it's very weird to see Tarzan going on a killing spree, basically. But that's the idea of this film. It's people trapped in a building in Colombia where they're told to basically kill off certain numbers of people within certain time frames. And it gets kind of grim in places. There's some bits that I'm just looking away from, and I really don't like faces being bashed in, and it happens a couple of times, unfortunately, or 3, maybe more. But it's one of the things I don't like. And any film that does it, I do kind of wince a lot. Pan's Labyrinth for one as well, the bottle scene. But it's got a lot more there than just people being smashed in the face. So it was a worthwhile endeavour to look at, and I really did enjoy it. It obviously, gave me some food for thought, and that food for thought is the fact that they agree to a contract whereby everything is provided for them by Belko. Absolutely everything. We see Danny's introduction to the company, the new girl who does so well to survive most of the film. It's quite comical, but we'll get round to that. And she's told that, she's got the house sorted and everything like that, the company credit card. It is basically like, we are giving you everything and you just work for us. Also, in return, can you have a tracker in your head? It's for your own security. And this is where the meat of my sort of in-depth look, my analysis, really comes from. We see it obviously a lot in the real world, and we joke about it. There could be in the iTunes term of service, something, some really great jokes, or like we'll have your 12th born son if you happen to get that far. If not, we'll just have your first daughter. There could be lines like that in there, but people really don't read these things, and it's not just iTunes. I don't read everything, and I don't use iTunes, so ergo logic. But it is a very big problem, I think, and I think that's what this film is telling us. Just agreeing to everything just because it's there and you might get something out of it, whether it be a job or a software or something. You've got to make sure that what you're giving up in return for it is reasonable. In the same way that, if someone tried to sell us a loaf of bread for 5,000 of our local currency, or if your local currency deals in thousands anyway, multiply it up. But, like $5,000, £5,000 for a loaf of bread, we'd be like, no. But when it comes to signing terms and conditions, anything could be in there and we're fine with it. And that's backwards. And like I say, this is what I think the film is saying. it's if none of them agreed to that, obviously they wouldn't have been employed there, but, their heads wouldn't have exploded. Now, right at the start of the film, we see the checkpoint and, the locals, the Colombians, being sent home. Now, I'm not sure. I don't think it's ever clarified in the film, and obviously I've watched it a couple of times now at least, so but I don't think they probably have the trackers in them, which would make sense. If they don't need the trackers in, if they don't have those trackers in them, then there's no way for them to be sort of part of the game. But of course, also in this introductory scene, we hear a great sort of Latin American version of "I Will Survive," which is quite telling, actually. It's it's very interesting and thematic, and this is something again that I talked about the gun checklist earlier with Rooker and his brother. Music that really kind of works or is brilliantly juxtaposed seems to also be a thing that he likes to do as much as possible. Part of the whole reason that the Guardians of the Galaxy films have worked is the soundtrack. Without those particular songs in it, I don't think it would have been quite as entertaining. I mean, yes, we would have still loved it. It was still funny and still great, in both counts. But, and of course, Groot will always win, especially Baby Groot. I can't wait to see more of adolescent Groot. But we're getting off topic. Without the music, it would have been a very different beast. And this is, like I say, something that Gunn does well. I know he didn't direct this, but obviously he did have a hand in it, and maybe that was some sort of influence. You never know, he wrote it, he might have put it in the script, I want this song. I want a Latin American version of this song. If not, find one that's close enough. Similarly, later on with California Dreaming, the Latin American version of that is great. Not the one on the credits, like the one actually during the crazy massacre scenes, as it were. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm running to different parts of the film that I don't want to touch on yet. But this introduction, with the music, is a way to introduce us to the world, to the environment, and to some of the people. I've already said some of the great people in it, but of course we also have, some of the great character bit part actors and such. Rusty Schwimmer, anything she's in, I love. She's such a good little character actor. And of course, David Dastmalchian, I hope I've said that right, always seems to get typecast as a bit crazy. I mean, just look at Gotham. But a lot of the roles he's been in, there's been a weird edge to him. I know he's kind of got the face for it, for better or worse, but I do feel he's getting a bit typecast, poor chappy, as Lonnie here. But, we do see all these people. We do see the introduction to the world. We see Marty and the cafeteria guys, that kind of thing. And it just brings us into the world before, as I say, we get this is how they take control. But with Mike, he's a very interesting character, and of course he's a great audience analog. I've used the term in previous videos, and it's a suitable term here. He's the one who's like, wait a minute, why were the locals sent home? What's going on here? There's got to be a reason. Why are all these new security guards with big guns around the place? He's the guy who, like an audience member watching a film, would go, what about this? What's this? He's spotting the things that seem a little perhaps out of place or unsettling or whatever you want to call it. The things that really we as an audience would be paying attention to. And he's great for that. And, as I say, we get introduced to the new girl and sort of shown around, and slowly but surely people are starting to cotton on, not just Mike, other people. We see some of the office dynamic with him and Leandra. But one thing did actually come to me when we were looking around the office, and a few times I was double checking just to see if it was just something that I'd imagined, but I think there might be something in it. There is a kind of barcode design on a lot of the glass walls, between sort of the offices. And that could be symbology. I love symbology in films and all sorts of media. And, what is a barcode? Well, it's a way to buy something. It, to me, cements this idea of we own you. It furthers that notion. We own you. We've even got barcodes to your offices, to where you work. So, and they give them the house and everything like that. They give them living quarters. So it's quite interesting. But another thing I spotted early on was the fact that they're talking up, what they do, sort of over the phone in various languages. And they mention that they're a charitable organisation, a non-profit. Now, this is a very corporate environment, and I've never worked for a non-profit organisation. I know, obviously, they have to be run as a business in certain ways and to certain degrees. But this is very, very corporate. And I know their job is to kind of almost be a recruiter. Their idea is to set up Americans in different countries with jobs. But, it all seems very kind of weird and corporate. And the fact that, there are these contracts which are very high-level corporate, they don't fit the model, to me, of a non-profit. And these would have all been red flags. But, of course, we often, like I said earlier, we'll often accept terms or contracts if we can get something out of them.
Bro, did you even happen to read what you signed when you started working for this place? We gave these the right to do practically whatever the they wanted to do to us.
And there you have it from the horse's mouth himself, Sean Gunn's Marty saying exactly that. The contract kind of gives them free rein. But it is interesting when everything starts to go a little awry and the first kind of voice comes over and everything starts to go a little wobbly. Because we see Norris with, as we learn later, his Special Forces training. he's trying to maintain order, he's trying to de-escalate, and also obviously his position as COO, I'm sure, but he's trying to take control of the situation and make sure that nothing goes too far, and just preventing panic. But it does highlight, sort of when we start to see these people panicking, they group together, and it's something that I've often hated, if you will, for that might be a too strong a word, but I'll use it here. It's one thing I've hated about the normal school system, this idea of forced socialization. Whilst yes, it's good to learn socialization skills, forced socialization in those kind of environments is not real socialization. We learn to fake it, we learn to pretend that we're having a good time or that we like a certain person for office or school politics and dynamics. It's, infrequently do we get real, true friendships. There are people I've worked with who I am quite, not glad to never have seen again, but I'm not bothered by the fact that I've never seen them again and never been in contact with them. But conversely, there are people I've worked with who I'm still in contact with now and really appreciate their input and their advice and really their outlook on life, like a friend. So it's one of the things I did notice, throughout the film, and particularly later on when everything really starts going south, the tribal kind of situation, for want of a better word, that kind of happens, when these people are grouping together. It really reinforces this idea that, whilst certain people might work together every day, they're not necessarily going to like each other. And I think this is really encapsulated well with Leandra and Wendell. That's a really, really bad situation of this forced socialization environment. She sees him as a pervert and a creep, and even says, "Don't call me a pervert" later on. And just a quick sidebar: John C. McGinley does creepy far too well. I mean, we already knew he was great at sarcastic and dry humour, as obviously Dr. Cox, but he does creepy far too well. I'm actually quite scared of the guy sometimes in this film. Even if I'm not a woman, I still find it very unsettling how he embodies that kind of approach with women. It's like, "Oh, you gave me these mixed signals." No, I was just existing and trying to be nice because it's forced socialization. I do feel for Leandra in that. One of the things that's often said about this, kind of situation is, well, you should have read your contract, blah, 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 and people seem to think it's just young, inexperienced people, but we see a variety of ages, and I don't know how old the Belko Corporation is. But, there are people of a wide spectrum, and I would assume that not all of the older ones would have been career, within the corporation, even if it's old enough. It's something that from my previous employment, like I've kind of mentioned before, because it was dealing with mobile telephone contracts, we'd say, "Well, did you not read it?" When people are like, "I didn't know that was part of it," or "I didn't know it would cost that much." It's like, well, you had the contract, you could have read it, and you do kind of get that impression of people just being young and inexperienced if you don't know that actually every single person is guilty of this at some point. It was good to show that, rather than it just being, the young uns and stuff like that. I do think it was great to show that everyone was really a candidate for this. But of course, we only have the start of it, just kill two. That's comparatively to later, an easier task, but eventually it does come down to even worse situations. And I obviously mentioned, the Special Forces training before trying to de-escalate. But later on, that all goes out the window. He has no power to de-escalate. And in fact, people who have no Special Forces training are doing a better job. From what I understand of military training, part of the idea is to de-escalate. You are trained that you should only actually take executive action and actually, potentially kill someone if there's no other option. If you can de-escalate the situation, great, go for it. Especially, like I say, if it's in Special Forces, it's more elite. So, although often Special Forces are in for the wet work specifically, so maybe it's less so in his case, but he would still have the basic training before that, one would expect. And like I say, he just does not do a good job. And also, like I keep saying as well, he's the COO, he should be taking control and making sure order is kept, making sure that the company can still operate. But he really starts to lose it, and it's particularly when the different factions are grouping together and everyone's just trying to survive in groups. about halfway through, Leandra says something about how, you know, we're all just focused on self-preservation, and I don't think she's right. Even in the film, it doesn't really bear out because of what I've said before about people grouping together, and obviously I'll come back to it once, you know, I've looked into it from what her angle is. Because her idea is that, you know, as long as person A is fine, person B through Z and onwards, you know, doesn't matter. But I don't think she's right. I mean, we do see elements of it, people turning on friends, more towards, you know, the end, when it's like literally just whoever's got the best kill count at the end survives. I mean, technically, if you're the last man standing, you have the best kill count by default. But, you know, I don't think she's right. Like I said before, people are grouping together. There's a kind of tribal atmosphere. And it's what we've done as a species before we had civilization. We grouped together. We're a social species. Whilst certain extreme situations can make us turn very, very selfish, and, you know, certain personality types are more self-centered, as a general average, like I say, we do see it borne out in the film, people do group together. She's got a very dim view of humanity, and, you know, maybe that's part of her sort of character story, you know, her background. Maybe she's always been surrounded by people who are out for themselves. You know, we have the situation with Wendell. She you know, he's just after, well, I don't think I need to spell it out, you know, and everything else be damned, you know, he can see that her and Mike are very close, but it doesn't matter to him. He's very much a hunter in that regard. The prey is all that matters. Everything else is secondary. And if there's competition, you beat it down. You know, but like I say, I like to believe that he's the minority in the world, and I think she's got it wrong. Now, as well as how we will happily sell our souls to the corporations for sometimes not even the best returns, we do also have a touch on the topic of utilitarianism, or even perhaps meritocracy, when they're trying to decide who will be killed for the 30, you know, for that criteria to be met. And, you know, he goes, right, anyone with kids under the age of 18 go on one side, obviously, to be saved, and then, you know, people over 60 on that side. You know, and it starts out as this very kind of, you know, I'd say more meritocratic, but I think that does come from a utilitarian point. Those people with kids and families, you know, need to go back to them. But when that guy says to Chet, yeah, played by Abraham Ben-Ruby, another great character actor, you know, is your brother made from your sperm? No. Well, at the end of the day, if he's still helping the upkeep, surely, in a truly utilitarian, meritocratic scenario, that would be just as valid. Just because it's not directly his child, if he's basically contributing, and, you know, it may be the greater portion than anyone else. You know, maybe his parents can't work for various reasons. So if he's contributing to that child's upkeep, that's just as valid. And I do think that was a very telling point, that whilst it starts out this way, where they're going, well, you know, that's a good thing to do, we want to do the right thing, it very quickly descends to, I like your face. I think when he's going through, you know, he's choosing these people seemingly at random. It's just him, her. But of course, when he stood in front of Mike, he says him. It's become less, this is for the greater good, and this is now what I want. I mean, yes, you could argue because Mike's going counter to what he's trying to do, and he sees that what he's doing is right, trying to have the less harm, really. Again, that utilitarian viewpoint. If Mike's constantly fighting him at every turn, it's going to be harder for them to all survive it. Of course, the idea was always probably going to be one survivor. So, in a way, Mike's done them all a favour by making it quicker. Sounds weird, but it does make some sense, you know, contextually. But, you know, it does become, I think, more of a personal vendetta situation. And of course he's one short, and everything then really goes crazy, and like I said before, we get the California Dreaming, beautiful. Before it really comes down to the last, you know, the last big push, and killing everyone. Leaving Mike standing at the end, you know, and one of the things that happens in that last fight is brilliant, and again, you know, the gun comedic style really shines through, where they're having this long drawn out fight, and you've got the corporate BS playing about what the Belko Corporation is all about, whilst they're basically just trying to kill each other. It just made me chuckle both times. You know, when I watched it recently to make notes, I was chuckling again. It was great, and I really did enjoy it from that point of view, because it's juxtaposition. Give me juxtaposition and I'm happy. As a great man once said, juxtaposition, you can't handle the juxtaposition. And now that word's probably sounding really weird to you. It is to me. But yeah, so obviously Mike survives and goes and meets the voice, sort of the overseer of all of this experiment, and does something really clever, actually, planting the bombs on them, thanks to, Marty's genius idea of trying to use it for the doors. Well, they're still around, let's do it. But of course, we get a very cabin in the woods kind of, monitor bank where it's actually not just one location. Of course, the Belko Corporation, as we hear in the blurb at the start, they're helping all around the world. So that's why we see so many. They're everywhere. And this is, again, I think, another thing that we're meant to take away. These corporations that we so happily sign contracts that probably don't work very well in our favour to, are everywhere. Corporations rule the world. And I think it's a bit of a warning to us. As we see more and more, corporations are getting the same kind of rights as humans, as actual individuals, and that's not good. That is not good. They're not people. They're run by people, but they're not people. They shouldn't have like a free reign to do whatever they want in the same way that people can. There needs to be checks and balances that just wouldn't exist for you or I in our private daily lives. And like I say, I do consider this a warning to us on both fronts. But of course, because it's gun involvement, it's a very entertaining, very musically brilliant, and very humorous at times, and very dark at times way of telling that, a way of warning us. And I think it did its job well. I really enjoyed it. So until next time, as always, take care.